Thank you. Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Rugby Borough Council's Cabinet meeting this evening. My name is Councillor Seb Lowe and I'm the chairman of this meeting. The meeting is being web streamed to the public and is being attended by members through Microsoft Teams. Before we begin working through the formal agenda, I will go through some brief rules on procedure. As set out in the introduction, the meeting is being web streamed to the public. This is being monitored by IT services. If at any point there are any streaming issues, then I will be informed and the meeting will be adjourned until such time that the technological issues can be resolved. If during the course of the meeting any member of the committee is having connection issues, then there'll be a short adjournment of up to 5 minutes to determine whether the connection issues can be resolved. If following the adjournment the connection issues cannot be resolved, then providing the meeting remains quorate, it will continue. It will be deemed that the member with connection issues has left the meeting and will no longer be able to participate. For all attendees, please switch off your microphones and cameras. For members of the committee, your microphones and cameras should be switched off unless you're speaking. If you wish to speak during the meeting, please use the raise hand function and wait for me to ask you to speak. The voting during virtual meetings will use the raised hand function. And now I will call on the Democratic Services Officer to confirm the vote. Are there any questions from anybody on procedure before we move into the formal agenda? I see no hands raised. So now I'll ask our Democratic Services Officer to confirm the attendees at this meeting, which will be for members of Cabinet and opposition group leaders only. Your name will be called, and when that happens, please can you confirm your attendance?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Mrs Crane.
Present.
Councillor Lowe.
Present.
Councillor Poole.
Present.
Councillor Ms Robbins.
Present.
Councillor Roberts.
Present.
Councillor Mrs Simpson-Vince.
Present.
Councillor Mrs O'Rourke. Councillor Roodhouse.
Present.
Councillor O'Rourke was actually in the meeting a couple of minutes ago, so I don't know whether she just lost a connection. But thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. We'll now move then into the formal agenda. So item number 1 is the minutes. Are members of Cabinet content for me to approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 1st of March 2021? Are there any dissenters? Councillor Robbins has raised her hand. Is that in disapproval or approval of the minutes?
Sorry, Chair, that was just to approve.
I thought so. Anybody not happy with the minutes? Okay. Item number 2 then is apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies for absence, Executive Director?
There are no apologies, Chair.
Okay. Item number 3 is declarations of interest. First of all, are there any non-pecuniary interests as defined by the Council's Code of Conduct for Councillors? I see no hands raised. And secondly, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest as defined by the Council's Code of Conduct for Councillors? I see no hands raised. And finally, are there any declarations of notice under Section 106 Local Government Finance Act 1992, non-payment of community charge or council tax? I see no hands raised. Okay. Item number 4 is question time. Do we have any questions, Executive Director?
There are no questions, Chair.
Thank you. Moving then to item number 5, which is the local lettings plan, and this is with you, Councillor Crane. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Before I move the report to item 5, members should note that I will be proposing a motion to amend the draft local lettings plan to remove the draft criterion 2 on page 8 of the report, which reads no more than 10% of households will have medical or welfare needs. And I'll come on to explain the reason for this change when I move the motion. But moving on to the report itself, this is an officer report for a proposed local lettings plan between Rugby and Midland Heart in relation to 103 homes for social rent at Halton, which Midland Heart has acquired with Homes England funding. So local lettings plans are an important tool which are commonly used by councils to work with partners to develop sustainable communities. And this lettings plan would allow Rugby to be involved in the allocation of these additional homes in partnership with Midland Heart. And it will ensure that the homes are accessible to those who are in housing need in Rugby at a time when the infrastructure at Halton is not yet fully developed. So the report sets out that the housing waiting list has received a large number of additional applications since the pandemic. And this plan would allow Rugby to help to develop a sustainable community, whilst also offering flexibility to offer secure and affordable homes to those families on lower incomes that are struggling to pay rent in the private sector. So this report is basically recommending the criteria for the local lettings plan, which will then have to be agreed by Midland Heart. So I would now like to move the motion to amend the report. So if I could have a seconder for that, please.
I'm happy to second your amendment, Councillor Crane.
Oh, thank you, Chair. So just to explain the reason for removing criterion 2 is that there's already a requirement as part of the current administrative process of letting properties for an offer of a property to reasonably meet the needs of the applicant. And as part of this, medical and welfare needs are a key consideration in determining suitability. So for this reason, criterion 2 in the draft plan is not actually needed. And criterion 4 will be amended accordingly to read that 30% of lettings will be made available to existing social housing tenants, with a key consideration that the new home will meet the needs, which would include medical and welfare, of the applicant to reflect the removal of criterion 2. So I'd like to move the motion to amend the report on that basis.
Thank you, Councillor Crane. I will call in, so Councillor O'Rourke is now back with us, so I will call in Councillor O'Rourke and Councillor Roodhouse in a moment. But first of all, I believe, and I'm sure legal will correct me if I've got this wrong, but I believe we need to vote first on whether to accept your amendments. Is that correct?
That's correct, Chair. Thank you.
Fine. In that case, we have a proposer and a seconder on the amendment. Can all those members of the Cabinet indicate whether they approve of the amendment, first of all?
Chair, could I ask you to second the motion, please?
I have already seconded it, I believe,
Apologies, Chair.
Executive Director, but I'm very happy to confirm once again that I second the amendment.
And that's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. So before us, the report is now amended as per Councillor Crane's comments. And I will now invite Councillor O'Rourke to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Lowe. It is good news that there are going to be lots of additional properties available at affordable rents, and that's a good news story, clearly. And I'm glad that the policy, the strategy has been amended. I did have some concerns about it, which I had raised with the Chief Officer last week. And whilst I sort of understand what Councillor Crane's saying, I mean, we should ensure that all of our properties are DDA compliant and that they're accessible to everybody, whether if they've got accessibility needs or whatever. But I am pleased to know that, and I know our properties are, the new properties there's building regs that they have to comply with. So it's a good news story, and I'm glad that the policy has been amended. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Rourke. Unless Councillor Crane wants to comment on that, no. Okay, Councillor Roodhouse.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm glad the report was amended to adjust for that. There's still some concerns, I think, around the general lettings element, that disabilities can be hidden. So you might actually look perfectly reasonable be able to walk, but actually have a disability. And I do think that the lettings policy doesn't always allow for those elements around. So that's something which no doubt I'll be continuing to raise over a period of time. But that's not just to do with this report. The other element is this, as this rolls out and starts to be potentially used elsewhere, which is referred to in the report with the expansion of rugby into other areas, that we might adopt this policy further. I didn't know whether the portfolio holder would be willing to consider that actually we ought to review this after 12 months and have a look at how it's working and how things are reacting to that, and just make sure that it's doing what it says on the tin.
Thank you, Councillor Roodhouse. And I mean, we will be monitoring how it goes, and I think it's a useful tool for rugby, and it helps us to allocate more homes to people who need them, and I think it gives us that flexibility, and I think it's going to be a really good thing. And yeah, I'll certainly be keeping an eye on how it goes.
Thank you. So Councillor Crane is moving the report as amended, seconded by me. Can I ask members of the Cabinet to indicate whether they support this, please?
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. That is carried then. Item number 6 is the litter in rugby report, which is with you, Councillor Roberts. So Councillor Roberts, would you like to briefly introduce this, please?
I certainly would. People of rugby are fed up with fly tippers and litterers. We've come up with a policy that starts to address the problem, and I recommend that the Cabinet supports it. So I propose this amendment, and policy. Do I have a seconder?
I will second that for you, Councillor Roberts. I'd also like to place on record my thanks to you for your hard work in addressing this very serious issue. You're right in what you say. The people of rugby are fed up with littering and fly tipping, and it's really good to see that the culmination of this report in terms of doing something about it. Although it should be said, this is not the final step. This is simply the first step in a number of measures that we will look to undertake to address the problems of litter and fly tipping in the borough. Councillor O'Rourke, do you wish to say anything on behalf of the Labour Group?
Yes, thank you. There's lots of very positive messages in the sort of report, so I do sort of, absolutely support that. But I agree with Councillor Roberts. I mean, the litter in the town and the fly tipping is just absolutely dreadful, and particularly noticeable around schools as well. And I do feel that we probably could do with some more bins, nearer or perhaps a little further away from the schools on routes that people walk to. So, I mean, we do need to put strong messages out there. I mean, when you think about how much it's costing the council each year to clean up these messes, I mean, across the country, I think it's about £1 billion it's costing taxpayers. I think we do need to be putting some really strong messages out. And if this doesn't work, then we probably need to think about taking more stringent action to make sure that people start complying. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor O'Rourke. Just to reiterate, this is simply the first step of what we will do to try and address these issues. It is by no means the last. There is no magic bullet to addressing a behavioural issue like littering and fly tipping, but I can assure you that the whole of the Cabinet and indeed the whole of the Council are behind doing whatever it takes to address this issue. Councillor Roodhouse, do you wish to say anything on behalf of the Liberal Democrats?
Thank you very much. Just a couple of things. It's taken a bit of a journey to get to the first step since last June and September, when these matters were raised through leaders and elsewhere. So I'm glad that we're now starting to get on the road to doing something. It's about sustaining it for the longer term as well. So if it's the first step, there's probably about another 1,000 steps to take, because you can't stop once you start. The other particular points around this as well is what enforcement and what actions can we take as a council against McDonald's and KFC and other fast food takeaways. Certainly from a litter pick that Councillor Douglas and I was on Sunday morning, we seemed to fill 2 bags full of KFC and McDonald's, where they sit in the car parks and actually eating and drinking the food, then just chuck the stuff out.
Thanks, Councillor Roothouse, and thank you for your support in terms of what we're doing here. You are right. This is a problem that's been highlighted for by a number of people for some time now, and it's good to see that we are finally doing something about it. Although, as you've said, there are a number of further steps that will need to be gone through, including looking at what we can do in terms of enforcement, and that's, as you quite correctly say, not just about enforcement against individuals, it's also against businesses as well. We have a proposer and a seconder. Can I ask members of the Cabinet to indicate whether they support this, please?
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you.
And I thank Cabinet for that.
Okay. Item number 7 then is a motion to exclude the public under section 100A(4) of the Local Government Act 1972. I ask members of Cabinet to consider the following resolution under section 104A of the Local Government Act 1972. The public be excluded from the meeting for the following items on the grounds they involve the likely disclosure of information defined in paragraphs 2 and 3 of Schedule 12A of the Act. Councillor Poole, will you second that for me?
Certainly will, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. All those members of the Cabinet in favour, please raise your hands.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. In that case, can I ask IT to stop the live stream and let me know when it has been stopped?